This has been a very strange growing season. We completely skipped spring and went directly into the type of heat we normally get in June and July, and then it backed off a little. The result has been that the plants have been confused, and it has been difficult to get things to grow. But now that things have finally gotten a good start, I decided it was time to do a maintenance tour around the garden. It's been fun to eat and collect a few blueberries after their first year. It's also been strange that I haven't had to fight the birds or squirrels, but maybe it's because the blueberries were small. Either way, the blueberries seemed unfazed by the heat. So I'll keep doing what I've been doing with them. You might remember the banana tree that was doing quite well last year. And then was killed off by a cold snap. I now find it sort of funny that I lusted to get one banana tree. But after recovering from dying over the winter, the remaining crown has produced 6. With one tree almost as big as the original. I have underground wiring, so the plan is to build a large bed and let those banana trees find their own way into the ground below. But that is a later project. The peach tree in its first year put out a peach that was quickly eaten by a squirrel. Other than that, it's filled out well. I plan to put in bush beans around the edges to form a guild that should cause even more growth while also fixing nitrogen. The blackberries too seem to like their new home. The Arapaho variety has gone from a seedling to liking its environment to sending out small branches. At this rate, I should have a full bush in no time. A friend of mine has a loquat tree in her yard and gave me a volunteer to add to my group of trees. I let it sit in water overnight before planting. I did the usual of putting sticks and leaves in the bottom of a good-sized pot to give the roots room to grow. I decided to use soil from another pot I wasn't using. Put in the plant. Followed by topsoil and a little bone meal to help with root development. Between the bananas, the blueberries, the peach tree, and the blackberries, I should have a small forest of fruit-bearing plants by next summer. For the regular garden, I tried to plant heat-tolerant plants like mustard and collard greens. But now the collards need thinning. I made sure to transplant in the afternoon when the heat of the day had passed. At first they looked a little sad, but a few days later had bounced back. Okra, too, is one of my heat-tolerant plants that does double duty by producing flowers for pollinators in addition to pods. This variety tastes nothing like what I remember from the grocery store and has an almost sweet taste and less slickness. I even learned that some people dry and ground the seeds to make caffeine-free coffee. Imagine that. Right now, I'm cutting off the pods to allow the plants to focus on just growing larger. A few other heat-tolerant plants that have been doing well in the hot weather are peanuts, sweet potatoes, and peppers. I went with Virginia peanuts because they produce large peanuts like the ones you get at games and put them in a number of locations. In the 5-gallon bucket stand, I even have a combination of peanuts, peppers, and sweet potatoes. Along with bush beans. There's another bed just for sweet potatoes. For now, as the vines spread out, I simply cut them off, root them out, and make more slips to add to the bed. Once I feel the bed is full, then I'll put up a trellis to let the vines spread. I'm also growing eggplant that I've put in with beans and other places around the long beds. The tomatoes, too, seem to have adjusted to the heat, with the major difference being that I have them up against the fence that faces west, so they get lots of afternoon shade to cool off. All these tomato plants came from just one plant, as I cut off suckers, rooted them in water, and then planted them back in the beds to grow larger. Speaking of growing larger, the sunflowers are growing pretty quickly, and I wanted to experiment with propagating sunflowers by cutting one to slow its growth. I assumed it would propagate because, just like tomato plants, it has the little hairs that turn into roots, so I cut off a top just above a node and placed it in water. I change the water twice a week, and I know I should have cut off the flower heads, but I just didn't have the heart to do it. On the other hand, the mother plant back in the bed is already creating another stalk to keep growing. But everything is not going perfectly, even with heat-tolerant plants. I mentioned in another video that the grasshoppers love to kill off the loofah as soon as they pop up from the soil. So I had to resort to growing them in a container and then transferring them to the beds. Even then, I've only been able to get one up and growing. So I've had to return to covering them once again to attempt to grow them in ground. And even with that, those little buggers never seem to give up. At least now, despite the heat, the garden has taken off, and I can shift to working on harvesting things for the outdoor kitchen. And you can see my progress on that front in the next video. See you next time.